Ah, my sweethearts. Come sit close. Let me tell you a story. A story that's been tucked away in my heart for so many years. It's not the kind of tale you hear at Sunday school or at church gatherings. It's a story about love, mistakes, and regret that never goes away. My name's Mabel Johnson, though most call me Granny. I live in Boone, North Carolina, where the mountains wrap around the town like an old quilt, soft and warm but holding secrets in every fold. I've seen plenty in my life, raised my children with love, with dreams, with hopes that they would build better lives than I ever did. But sometimes, life doesn't go the way you pray for. I want to tell you about my family, about my daughter Ellie, and about my grandson, Daniel. But before that, you have to understand the kind of life I lived, the kind of promises I made, and how those promises, those little words I whispered to myself in the dark, led me to heartbreak, silence, and, well, the end of my days. You see, after Ellie passed, oh, bless her heart, I moved into this small mountain cabin. It's nothing fancy, just wood beams and a stone fireplace, but it's mine. Every morning, I sit by the window with a cup of tea, the mist rolling in from the Blue Ridge Mountains like a slow-moving cloud, and I think about the past. This cabin became my sanctuary. It's where I stitched the quilt you've probably heard about, the one full of colorful patches, each representing a promise I made but couldn't keep. Every stitch is a memory, every seam holds a tear I never cried out loud. When I first came here, I thought I was done with life's pains. I thought, Mabel, it's time to rest. But grief has a way of following you into quiet places. Every evening, when the sky turned purple and the crickets sang their lullaby, I would pull out Ellie's old letters and hold them close to my chest like a prayer bead. Oh, Ellie, my darling girl. She was born with a laugh that could brighten a room and eyes that sparkled like morning dew. From the time she was little, I dreamed for her. I wanted her to go to college, to dance, to laugh without fear. But life, well, life is never simple. Ellie married young, too young. Her husband wasn't the man I thought she deserved. He was controlling, harsh, and when I confronted her, she would cry but say, Mama, I love him. I'll make it work. For years, I prayed she'd find strength. I promised myself I would always be there for her. But promises are fragile when life gets heavy. I kept telling myself that one day she'd ask for help, that one day she'd lean on me. But she never did. The day she died, oh child, it broke something inside me. A car accident on a rainy night. One moment laughing on the phone, the next, gone. Just like that. Then there's Daniel, my only grandson. Ellie's boy, with a smile just like hers, and hair curling around his ears like a golden halo. When Ellie died, I wrapped him in my arms and vowed that I would be his strength, his guide. For a while, he was my world. We baked cookies together, played checkers on the porch, and I told him stories from when I was a girl. He called me Granny with such sweetness that I'd melt every time. I tucked him into bed, kissed his forehead and whispered, You are loved, always. But boys grow up, don't they? They leave for school, for jobs, for life. And I stayed behind. At first, Daniel would visit on holidays, with that same smile. Then the visits became rare. Calls shorter. Letters faded. His world grew larger, and mine, smaller. I told myself it was natural. Children must fly, I'd say with a brave smile. But deep down, oh deep down, I missed him like the sea misses the shore. I never wanted to burden him with sorrow. So I kept quiet. I kept loving him from afar. Every birthday card I sent was filled with little memories. The time we baked gingerbread, the time we painted pumpkins, the time he said he wanted to grow up and help others. Inside, I whispered another promise, one I never told him. I will always forgive you, my child. Even if you forget me, even if you walk away, I will never stop loving you. That's the kind of mother I was. Some evenings, I'd sit by the fire and talk to Ellie's old photo. You see that boy? I'd say softly. That's your son. He's growing up without you, but I'll be here. I'll be both mother and grandmother to him. The nights were the hardest. I'd sit alone, cradling the quilt, tracing its seams with my fingers, and remember her laughter, her stubbornness, and the way she used to tease me when I fussed too much. Sometimes, I'd whisper aloud, Forgive me for not being there when you needed me. Sometimes, I'd cry quietly, afraid to disturb the silence. But no matter what, I never stopped loving my family. And then, one day, something changed. I won't tell you what happened next just yet. Let's just say that love and regret are powerful things. They twist around your heart and show you faces you never expected to see. But that's for later, my dears. For now, know this. I built my life on promises, on hope, and on love so fierce it frightened even me. I gave everything to my daughter and my grandson, and when life pushed them away, I kept loving them still. That's how it all began. So, that's the story of my beginning, before the storm came crashing down. Now if you're ready, I'll tell you about the day I discovered the betrayal that changed everything. But that's a story for the next time. Ah, my babies. You want to know how it all fell apart, don't you? How a heart full of love turned into a heart full of wounds. It didn't happen all at once. Betrayal never does. It creeps in like fog in the mountains, slow, silent, and almost invisible until you're lost within it. Let me tell you how I found out. I can still feel it, the way the world shifted beneath my feet that day. It was a late autumn afternoon. The trees outside my cabin were dressed in red and gold, their leaves dancing like little flames in the crisp wind. I had been preparing sweet potato pie, humming an old hymn, when I noticed something different. There was a silence. Not the peaceful kind you feel in the mountains at dusk, but the kind that feels heavy. The kind that wraps itself around your chest and doesn't let go. I stood at the window and waited for Daniel to call, as he always did on weekends. But the phone sat quietly. No ring. No voicemail. I brushed it off at first. He's busy. He's a grown man now, I whispered to myself. But the hours crawled like spiders on the walls. That evening, when the sun dipped and the first stars blinked awake, I received a text, not from him, but from someone else. It was a simple message. Can't talk now. He's home. I froze. Who was at my grandson's home? I stared at the screen, hands trembling. I knew his schedule. I knew when he worked, when he studied, when he called me last. There was no reason for anyone to be there. I tried calling him. No answer. I sent a message. No reply. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I sat by the fire that night, trying not to panic, but my mind raced. I thought of Ellie, my Ellie, and how she always wanted him to be happy, how she would pray for him even from heaven. And now, this? The next morning, I couldn't sit still. I brewed strong coffee and put on my coat, deciding I would drive to his apartment in the city. The mountain roads curved like snakes, and I gripped the steering wheel tight as my breath fogged the windows. I kept whispering prayers, asking the Lord to let this be nothing, just a misunderstanding. But deep down I knew. When I reached his building, my heart was pounding louder than the engine. I parked far enough so I wouldn't be seen and slowly climbed the stairs. At his door, I pressed my ear to the wood. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Not the polite kind, not the neighbor's chit-chat. This was deep, familiar, careless laughter. The kind that belongs to those who share secrets, touches, promises. I stood frozen. For a moment, I considered turning around. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe he was helping someone. Maybe it was nothing. But another wave of laughter hit me like a slap. I raised my hand and pressed the doorbell softly. Daniel opened the door himself. His eyes widened the second he saw me, but for a brief second, shame flashed across his face before he forced a smile. Granny, you're here, he said, his voice tight. I glanced past him, and there she was. A young woman. Hair cascading like dark silk, eyes gleaming with mischief. Her lips curved in a smile that didn't bother hiding its meaning. She wore a loose sweater, something one would only wear in comfort, in intimacy. They froze. In that frozen second, I felt like the floor had dropped beneath me. Come in, Granny, Daniel forced out, his throat dry. I shook my head. No, child, I whispered, turning to leave. But I heard him plead. Please, just talk. I stood in the hallway like a ghost, listening as he struggled to explain. I didn't mean for it to happen, he stammered. But it did, the woman whispered. My heart broke in that instant. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to collapse in tears. But something inside me held still. I nodded slowly, turned, and walked down the stairs. Behind me, I could hear them arguing softly. I reached my car and sat there for several minutes, staring at nothing, holding the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The drive back to Boone felt like a lifetime. I kept staring at the road, but the trees blurred into streaks of orange and brown. I whispered to myself again and again, he's just a boy. He's confused. He's hurting. But another voice inside me hissed, he's lying. When I returned to my cabin, I didn't cook. I didn't light the fire. I sat by the window for hours, staring at the same tree branch swaying in the wind. That night, I took out the quilt Ellie had left me and traced each patch, each seam. I thought of the promises I made, to forgive, to be strong, but my fingers shook. I cried into the fabric until my tears darkened the cloth. 2 days later, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside were letters Daniel never sent me. In them, he wrote about loneliness, regret, confusion, and about wanting to be loved, needing someone to understand him. He spoke of feeling abandoned after his mother's death, how he didn't know how to reach out, how he wanted to escape his own guilt. Reading those words, I wept again. He wasn't evil. He was broken. But that didn't make it hurt any less. For weeks, I carried this knowledge like a stone in my chest. I wanted to scream at him, to demand explanations. But every time I picked up the phone, my hand froze. What would I say? How could you? But love doesn't always scream. Sometimes it weeps silently. And that's what I did. I loved him, even as I ached for him to know how much pain he had caused. So, my sweet ones, that's how I found out. I walked into a door and saw love being betrayed before my very eyes. I heard laughter that shouldn't have been there. I read words that broke my heart, but I still loved him. That's the beginning of the storm. The betrayal planted its seeds that day, and from that day forward, the world I thought I knew began to unravel. But that's a tale for another night, when I tell you how the pain grew into something dark, and how a grandmother's love turned into something fierce. Ah, my darlings, you asked how my heart handled such a blow. Let me tell you, it wasn't easy. You see, when you love someone, you want to forgive them instantly. That's what love teaches you. But love also teaches you that forgiveness isn't simple. After I found out, after those tears soaked my quilt and those unsent letters shook my soul, I spiraled. I doubted everything I ever believed about him, about myself, about love, about promises. And somewhere deep inside, a new fire started burning. A fire that whispered revenge. 4 days, I barely slept. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, hands clenched around the edge of my bed. The silence in my cabin became deafening. Even the wind outside sounded sharp and accusing. Sometimes, I would stare at the telephone for hours. Sometimes, I would cry until my eyes puffed up and I couldn't see straight. Other times, I sat still, staring at the quilt, and wondered what kind of mother's love could withstand such betrayal. Was I weak for still loving him? Or was that love the strongest part of me? At times, I heard my Ellie's voice. Mom, you always stood tall. You always knew what to do. But other times, I heard whispers from nowhere. He doesn't deserve you. He broke your heart. Teach him a lesson. Make him feel the same emptiness you do. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. One afternoon, my neighbor Clara knocked on my door. Mabel, you look pale, she said softly. I forced a smile. I'm fine, Clara, I lied. She sat beside me on the porch steps. It's okay to let someone in, you know. Don't carry this all alone. I swallowed hard. For a brief moment, I almost told her everything. But I shook my head. No, I'll be all right, I whispered. The next day, I read Daniel's letters once more. I miss her. I wish I knew how to fix this. Sometimes I feel like I'll never be enough. I ran my fingers over the paper like it was skin. How could someone so broken do such a thing? How could I hate him when his pain was written in every word? And yet, I hated him. I hated how easily he turned away from love, how carelessly he laughed in the arms of someone else, while I sat alone in a cabin surrounded by promises stitched into fabric. For a while, I thought revenge would be like shouting, tearing things apart, confronting him with fury. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that true revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about making him feel what I felt. Not physically, but emotionally. Not with rage, but with emptiness. I wanted him to know what it was to wait by the phone, to search for love and find none, to regret every missed call, every lie. So, I began to plan. I stopped answering his calls. Whenever he messaged, I would read them but never reply. At first, I felt guilty. I wanted to explain. But then I reminded myself, he had chosen to shut me out. I even blocked him for a week. His messages poured in, pleading, apologetic, desperate. I kept my eyes dry. One evening, I took the quilt, the one Ellie and I had sewn together when she was a little girl, and placed it in the attic, away from sight. It was hard to hide it. Every patch was stitched with memories. But that quilt was more than fabric, it was his mother's love. I wanted him to feel its absence. For weeks, I didn't mention it. I began writing. Not angry rants, not curses, but letters addressed to him that I would never send. I poured everything into them, how I remembered him as a child, how I prayed for his happiness, how I forgave him before knowing the full story, and finally, how much it hurt to see him choose loneliness over love. Each letter I wrote felt like carving my soul open, but each time I folded them away, I felt lighter. Late at night, I would sometimes drive to his apartment complex. I never rang the bell. I stood at the edge of the parking lot and watched from a distance. I saw him sitting alone on the balcony, head in hands. I saw him staring blankly at his phone. One night, I even left a small note tucked under his door. Some promises are stitched with love. Some are stitched with regret. Choose which you want to wear. I never saw him pick it up, but I knew the message would reach him. But let me confess something, my loves. Not every day was strong. There were nights when I wanted to call him and scream. There were mornings when I wanted to pack my bags and go sit beside him, hold his hand, and tell him everything I felt. There were times I crumpled the letters, tore them apart, and wept into the dark. But every time the fire threatened to fade, I remembered Ellie's laughter, the way she used to whisper, "Mom, you're strong." So I kept going. One particular evening, as I sat by the fire, a thought crept in that chilled me. What if he never feels the pain? What if he goes on with his life, never looking back? That night, I dreamed of him laughing with that woman, holding hands, cooking dinners, celebrating birthdays. I woke up gasping. For the first time, I feared that my revenge wouldn't be enough. I realized then that revenge, at its core, wasn't about hurting him, it was about confronting the emptiness inside me. It was about making peace. But peace couldn't come until I acted. And so, I crafted the last step. A plan that would leave him wondering, searching, aching. Not to destroy him, but to force him to feel the weight of love's absence. I gathered things that mattered. I wrapped each one with care, just like I used to sew the quilt. A childhood toy, a photograph, a letter written in my own hand. And then I began to prepare for the day I would set this plan in motion. That's how the storm inside me began to shape itself. I was torn between love and fury, between forgiveness and punishment. Some days, I would pray for him. Other days, I whispered curses in the dark. But always, my heart beat with the rhythm of a mother's love. That's what revenge is, my darlings. Not always about hate. Sometimes it's about teaching someone how deep the wound can be, so they never forget it. And soon, it would be time for the final act. But that's for another night, when I tell you how the pieces fell into place. Ah, my sweet ones. Once you've made a plan, that's when the hardest part begins. Acting on it. Not because it's cruel, but because it feels like tearing apart the very fabric of your heart. But I knew I had to do it. For him to understand love's weight. For him to feel the ache of loss. Let me tell you how it all unfolded. The morning I chose to begin, the air outside was crisp and cold. A thin layer of fog clung to the trees like ghosts reluctant to leave. I brewed tea, wrapped myself in a soft shawl, and sat before the fire one last time. I opened my journal and wrote the final entry. Today, I let go. Not because I am done loving you, but because love cannot remain chained to silence. May this teach you how promises, once broken, leave scars you cannot see. I sealed the pages, placed them alongside photographs, small mementos, and letters in a wooden box. I whispered to the quilt folded in the corner. Forgive me. This is the only way he will understand. The first part of the plan was subtle. For weeks, he had felt abandoned. But he still didn't know why. So, I began leaving small messages in places only he would find them. That afternoon, I visited the small park near his apartment. I sat on a bench and waited until he came by. He looked worn, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. I didn't speak to him. But later that week, I left a note at the bench. Not all absences are forgetfulness. Some are the weight of promises ignored. The next day, I left another near the mailboxes. A quilt holds warmth until it's put away. Some love isn't visible, but it's always there. I wanted him to feel like someone watched him, cared for him, loved him silently, and I knew it would gnaw at his heart. On the third day, I decided it was time to pull him closer to the edge. I borrowed a friend's phone and called him from an untraceable number. Hello? His voice wavered. Daniel, I whispered softly. His breath hitched. Who is this? I smiled though he couldn't see it. I'm the one you left behind. The one stitched into every corner of your past. He went silent. I won't call again, I said. But know this, love waits. Even in silence. Then I hung up. His phone screen remained lit for several seconds before he powered it off. A week later, I packed the wooden box. Inside I placed his baby blanket, soft with age. A photograph of him at age 5, grinning at the camera. A letter to Ellie, never sent. A letter to him, never delivered. A piece of the quilt he once helped sew. On top, I wrote a single line. Some promises are stitched for life. I arranged for it to be delivered to his door by the local courier, addressed anonymously. The day it arrived, I watched from afar as he opened it. His eyes froze when he saw the photograph. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letters. I felt a sharp stab in my chest, but I smiled softly. I wanted to see his reaction in person, but I couldn't bring myself to face him. So, I wrote him another letter and left it tucked inside the parcel. You may never know who sent this, but you will know the love behind it. I stood by you, stitched promises into your life. I let silence teach you what words never could. He later told me, though he never traced it back, that reading the letter broke him. He spent hours curled on his couch, holding the photograph, crying without restraint. A month later, I found the quilt again. It was lying on his doorstep. The corners frayed, some patches faded with age, but carefully folded. He had returned it without a word. My hands shook as I picked it up. For the first time in weeks, I cried, not out of rage, but relief. He had felt it. He had felt the warmth. He had felt the loss. The unexpected twist. But revenge never unfolds as neatly as one hopes. A few days later, he showed up at my door. His eyes red, face pale, but holding something in his hand. Mom, he whispered. I froze. He stepped closer. I'm sorry. He fell to his knees, holding my hands, weeping uncontrollably. I didn't know how to ask for help. I thought I could handle it all on my own. I was scared. The words cracked something inside me. I wanted to yell, to remind him of his betrayals. But all I could do was stroke his hair like I used to when he was a boy. I know, I whispered. And I realized, revenge, at its heart, wasn't about punishment. Before he left, I handed him the final letter. Forgiveness isn't the absence of hurt, it's the presence of love, even when hurt deeply. May you carry it well. He pressed it to his chest and whispered, thank you. So that, my little ones, is how I taught him. Not with anger, not with hate, but with patience, silence, and reminders stitched into things that last longer than words. The quilt, the letters, the memories, those were my tools. And by the time he truly understood, his heart had already been softened. That's the power of love. And sometimes, the quietest revenge is simply showing someone what they lost. Ah, my loves, you've been with me through every tear, every silence, every scar stitched into that old quilt. Now it's time I tell you what came after. What happens when revenge is no longer about hurting, but about healing. You see, after he came to my door, after he fell at my feet with tears in his eyes, something shifted. It wasn't that everything suddenly became perfect. No, life doesn't give us such easy gifts. But something deeper happened. 4 weeks, he visited. Not just once or twice, but every week. He'd bring flowers, or his favorite tea, or sometimes nothing at all. Just sit beside me. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes we cried together. Sometimes we laughed at memories long buried. He asked questions, hesitant at first, then bold. Did you ever hate me? Why didn't you tell me you needed help? Did you miss me every day? I answered honestly, yes. I missed you. But I also knew, life can overwhelm even the strongest hearts. We both learned something new. Trust isn't given once, it's built slowly, with patience and grace. The quilt stayed between us. We didn't fix its tears or wash away its stains. Instead, we wrapped ourselves in it during cold nights, let it remind us of promises kept and broken, of love that lingers even after words fail. Sometimes, I'd hold his hand and trace the faded patches. That's when you learn to ride your bike. That's the corner where you cried after your first heartbreak. He'd smile softly, eyes wet, as memories came rushing back. The quilt became our bridge, a reminder that love isn't perfect, but it's always worth holding on to. One evening, he asked me, "Do you forgive me for sending you away?" I paused. Forgiveness, I told him, doesn't mean I forget the pain or pretend it never happened. It means I refuse to let it define our love, I said gently. He wept again. I wish I could change the past. I stroked his cheek. My child, you cannot change what's been done, but you can choose what it teaches you. That night, we sat wrapped in the quilt, and for the first time in years, it felt like home again. Before long, he began helping others. He started volunteering at the same home he once sent me to. He sat with elderly residents, listening, holding their hands, sharing stories of his own mistakes, helping them feel seen. I watched from afar and felt proud, not because he was making amends, but because he was transforming his pain into compassion. He even started a small fund in memory of his mother, me. It wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about love spreading outward. Now, I sit by the fire, telling you this not to make you sad, but to remind you that life isn't about being perfect or never hurting. It's about what you do with that hurt. You can let it turn into bitterness, or you can let it become wisdom. I chose to teach him through love. I chose to let silence speak. I chose forgiveness, not because it erased the past, but because it made peace with it. And that, my dear ones, is how you live a full life. Not by never stumbling, but by always standing up, holding each other close, and remembering that love, like a quilt, is stitched one patch at a time. So whenever you feel anger rising, whenever you feel alone or wronged, ask yourself, can I turn this pain into something beautiful? Because love is patient. Love is quiet. Love never truly lets go. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is to love harder than before.